Chapter 7. The Cucaracha Voice. Sometime late Sunday night, the weather changed. Snow began to melt. By Monday morning, the fleet of school buses came sloshing through slush. Boots and waffle stompers tracked mud and icy water into the halls of Irwin J. Sneed Elementary School, where the wearers were met by Mr. Costa holding a large mop. Ralph, whose weekend had been so long and so lonely, felt such a surge of joy and relief at the sound of school buses that he skittered back to room 5 in a forgiving mood. There he hid in the old mitten. Anything was better than that long, cold, miserable weekend, and perhaps Ryan had found a way of repairing the motorcycle. Miss Kay's class arrived in a grouchy mood. Snow was fun. Slush was not. There was more confusion than usual as the children peeled off their wraps and kicked off their boots. Many were carrying clippings from the Cucaracha Voice. Miss Kay was not in the room to welcome them, which did not help. Gordon told Melissa, who was wearing wet shoes and carrying her boots, that he was sure that static electricity would not hold a mouse to a sock. Melissa told Gordon he had no imagination. Brad arrived with his arm in a sling. Instantly, a rumor started that Brad had hit Ryan so hard he had injured his hand. Sides were taken, arguments began. Ryan glared at Brad. "You owe me a motorcycle for the one you broke. Serves you right if you hurt your hand." "That motorcycle you said was Ralph's?" scoffed Brad. "What would that stupid mouse do with a motorcycle?" Someone dropped a clipping, and before it was picked up, Ralph was able to glimpse a picture of himself, looking small and frightened in the goldfish bowl. The picture was not bad. In fact, it was quite good. His eyes were bright, and each hair was distinct. Ralph congratulated himself on being such a handsome mouse, and wondered if Matt, back at the inn, if he still worked there, would see the picture, recognize, and perhaps miss him. As the last bell rang, Miss Kay hurried into the room with a worried look on her face. Instantly, she was surrounded by excited children, waving clippings from the Cucaracha Voice and trying to talk at once. "It wasn't like that at all," they said. "That reporter got it all wrong. It's a bunch of lies. They didn't even put our picture in the paper." Most puzzling was, Ralph isn't that kind of mouse. He's nice. They're behaving like a bunch of little mice, thought Ralph. At the same time, he wondered uneasily what the paper had said about him. That he wasn't nice? Impossible. Miss Kay stood without speaking at the front of the room. Gradually the class grew quiet. "That's better," said Miss Kay. Amazing, thought Ralph. The teacher had silenced the class without using a single bad word. He was even more ashamed of the way he had treated his little relatives. After the class recited liberty and justice for all, but not for me, thought Ralph. Miss Kay said, "Class, we have a lot to talk about this morning, and we can't talk if we all speak at once. Brad, suppose you begin by telling us what happened to your arm." Brad looked embarrassed. "Aw, I just sprained it when I tried to ride my bike in the mud. I was trying to get ready for the first motocross race this spring." The class respected what Brad had tried to do, and Ralph was struck by a sudden thought. Brad was exactly the sort of boy who could understand a mouse who rode a motorcycle. To change the subject, Brad asked, "Is Ralph going to try to run the maze again?" "How about it, Ryan?" asked Miss Kay. "Did you bring Ralph to school today?" "He's lost." Ryan sounded worried. "He got mad because... well, he got mad Friday afternoon and disappeared." "I am not lost," Ralph said to himself. "I know where I am, right here in this mitten." A sigh of disappointment ran through room 5. The class liked Ralph. Besides, watching a mouse in a maze was more fun than social studies or spelling. "Miss Kay," said Gordon, "even if Ryan finds Ralph, I don't think he should have to run the maze again. He proved there was a better way to get the peanut butter than running into dead ends." "Why, he's right," thought Ralph, perked up by Gordon's support. "I'm smarter than I thought I was." "Class, do you agree?" asked Miss Kay, who liked her pupils to think. The class thought. Brad was first to speak. "In motocross racing, it's against the rules to get off your bike. I think he cheated." Several people were quick to point out that testing intelligence with a maze was not the same thing as racing a bicycle, even a BMX. "Maybe he was too amazed to do it right," suggested Melissa with a giggle. "Well, I think he proved he was gifted and talented." Gloria spoke as if she had ended the discussion by using words the school used to describe children such as herself. Miss Kay asked for a show of hands. 21 children agreed that Ralph had found a better way to run the maze. 5 felt he cheated. Case settled. Ralph was an unusually smart mouse, something he had doubted only once in a while. "Speaking of solving problems," said Miss Kay, "do you think fighting is a good way to settle arguments?" "No," chorused the girls. Ryan defended himself. "Brad pushed me first. Besides, it wasn't a fair fight because I had Ralph in my pocket and didn't want him to get hurt." "What do you have to say, Brad?" Miss Kay asked. "He made me mad. Always bragging about how smart his mouse is and then trying to make the maze easy." Brad slid down in his chair. "Anyhow, how was I supposed to know he had his old mouse in his pocket?" Ryan muttered to Brad. "Just because you get to come to school in a tow truck, you think you're so big. Just because you get to live in a hotel, you think you're better than anybody," mumbled Ryan. These remarks were lost to the class because the girls, bored with the scuffle discussion, were waving their clippings from the Cucaracha Voice. "Miss Kay," said Gloria, "I think that reporter was unfair. What she said about us was all wrong." Some members of the class, protesting that their families did not subscribe to the Voice, demanded to know what the article said. Miss Kay read the headline aloud: "Class Nabs Sneed Invader." "What's she talking about?" wondered Ralph, moving from the mitten to Melissa's overturned boot for a better view. "What invader?" Miss Kay continued. Under Ralph's picture, the story reads, "Friday afternoon, the 5th grade class of Miss Bambi Knuckerbacker at Irwin J. Sneed Elementary School exhibited a mouse thought to be one of many mice overrunning their school. They also discussed the harm rodents do to crops and food supplies and the rapidity with which they multiply." There was a murmur of disapproval from the class at as Miss Kay read on. When informed of the mouse plague at the monthly meeting of the school board Friday evening, Superintendent Clyde R. Crossman promised a full investigation of conditions at Sneed. The class sat in outraged silence. Ralph was aghast. One tiny mouse, an invader, overrunning the whole school all by himself? Suddenly, everyone had something to say. Our exhibit wasn't like that at all. We were having fun, and she made our school sound terrible. Poor little Ralph didn't invade us. Ryan brought him to school. She made our school sound dirty, and Mr. Costa works hard. She was mean not to put our picture in the paper. She stayed about 2 minutes and didn't understand what we were doing." Gordon felt he was to blame for the story. "I didn't mean to get Ralph investigated," he said. "I just wrote facts I found in library books. I didn't mean Ralph personally ran around harming crops." "Just how am I going to be investigated?" Ralph was beginning to wonder. Brad was pleased that someone else was in the wrong. "I think that reporter is a rat fink," was his contribution to the discussion. Miss Kay asked if he couldn't find a better way of expressing himself. After a moment he said, "I think that reporter just said what she wanted to say and didn't care about us." One boy said, "My father says bad news sells more papers than good news." Everyone agreed that the reporters saying bad things about their school in order to sell more copies of the Cucaracha Voice was mean, unfair, and just plain sneaky. They did good things at their school, and she should have said so. Melissa said, "I think we should all have written letters to the paper and say the story wasn't true and that there is, or was, only one mouse here." "A splendid idea, Melissa," said Miss Kay, always eager for a new project. "We can write letters for our language arts class. However, I think we should be careful that we tell the truth." Of course Room 5 would tell the truth. Room 5 always told the truth, except when they fibbed a little. Miss Kay continued, "Can we be sure that Ralph was the only mouse in school? Our principal told me that this morning after reading the article in last night's Voice. The cafeteria workers reported a hole in a bag of sugar and tail tracings in the spilled sugar. The 4th grade teacher reported that seeds had disappeared from the mosaics her class had made. The librarian said the shredded material from the bags that books are mailed in has been scattered on the carpet. And the 1st grade teacher said she found tooth marks in a jar of paste. This information silenced the class, but left Ralph burdened with guilt. He was just a little mouse trying to get along in the world. He had not meant to cause so much trouble." Melissa spoke out. "Maybe if there are other mice, and we catch Ralph again, we could find him a girlfriend and have a mouse wedding." "Oh, yes," said the girls, sighing. The boys were impolite about the suggestion. So was Ralph. "We don't know where Ralph is," was Miss Kay's comment, "and perhaps we should wait to write our letters until after the investigation. After all, there may be more mice in the school." The disappointed class who had been planning the angry letters they would write to the newspaper had to agree. "But Miss Kay," said Gloria, "isn't your name Heidi?" Miss Kay laughed. "Yes, it is." "Then how come the reporter called you Bambi?" asked Gloria. "She must have confused her book characters," was Miss Kay's amused answer. Ralph saw nothing to be amused about. What would the investigation mean? Cats? An exterminator with traps and poisons? Fumigation with deadly fumes seeping through the halls? That new electronic mouser that made a noise only mice could hear and sent them screaming into the night? Ralph was sure of one thing. He had to escape from Irwin J. Sneed Elementary School, and he had to escape soon.